Over the past month, things have certainly brightened for Nvidia. You've got to look at a 5-day chart, though, first. What does that tell us?
Well, I'll tell you what, and good morning, Diane. You know, this tells us, I think, a little bit about this rumor mill, perhaps, that has been driving some of this near-term excitement about this possibility. And, you know, this is something that's come up before, you know, the speculation about whether or not Nvidia will or won't get more into that client-side space. But you can see over the course of the last 5 days, there's been some upward movement here. In fact, it's been a pretty strong rally up to this 190 mark off of a bit of a support down around that 174, 175 area. That being said, as it approaches 190 and gets into this squeeze and deep into the apex of that squeezing triangle there, you see that ADX indicator that we've got in the lower panel, which is a trend strength gauge, has just really fallen off significantly. It's fallen below that 25 level, which is kind of that line of demarcation for a strong trend. And in this particular case, it's sitting below that level. So that would suggest that, you know, this has been maybe a buy the rumor, now potentially sell the news type of scenario. The question is, if the rumor does come true, does this have enough oomph to pop up through this 190 and beyond some of the other resistance levels that we'll see on the longer term basis, Diane?
Or even if Nvidia continues to trade along some of the macro headlines, but you've got to look at the 1-year chart as well, and that looks pretty strong for Nvidia. Walk us through what we should notice there.
Yeah, you know, this 1-year chart is kind of interesting because it is relatively strong, but that word relative, I think, is the interesting component of this, because they've been stuck in this range, kind of stuck in the middle with you here between 165 and that 190, 197 resistance area over the course of the last, 2 earnings here, at least. If you go back into the August earnings, 3 earnings, it's been in this same relative range. And it's gained some momentum, and it's not popped out of that 197 absolute resistance area in the last 2 months. So that's been a challenge for those investors that have jumped in looking for stronger price appreciation. Swing traders have been perhaps enjoying this move and oscillation up and down in that range. So maybe some kind of rumor to push this out of its tracks in some way, giving a little bit of a nudge maybe above that resistance level, or perhaps even bringing it back down to this 165, 170 area as a level of support. But it's got some pretty strong momentum in this longer term chart, at least the MACD, which tends to lag a little bit as this bangs its head on that 190 mark. That could give some impetus if this does break out to that 197 and perhaps potentially beyond, Diane.
I want to pick your brain on Nvidia because it's been stuck a little bit around the levels. Lately, it got a little pop, right? So just for this month of April, it's moved higher by about 7.8%. Ray Wong was just on with us a moment ago. He said he liked this name, but at 188 today, and the high was 212. You know, so obviously we're off the highs that was last October. Your thoughts on this chart?
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with your previous guest here on his view here. So semiconductors have really been that area of the market that really didn't miss a beat, ripping to new all-time highs. And as far as Nvidia really being the supposable leader in that space, for most of the last 6 months, it's really been stuck in this range between 195 and 170 or so. We saw, similar to the last chart with the recent lows being made, we saw momentum diverge, pricing in or printing a higher low, so giving that bullish momentum divergence, which is that first sign of that possible bottom taking place. So looks like we had that false breakdown at support. We know that failed breakdowns or failed moves really turn into fast moves in the opposite direction, and that's what we've seen here. So I will say Nvidia does have short-term support right in the middle of this range, right at that 200-day moving average, right around 180 or so. And then resistance, long-term resistance, is going to be up ahead at 195 from that range. But on shorter time frames, you can see bottoming formations like a cup and handle pattern. You see that momentum has actually shifted into a bullish regime on the shorter time frame. So I will say if Nvidia can make its way up to and out of this range, they could be looking at a much larger measured move to the upside past those all-time highs around 220.
Do you think that this makes sense at all? Could Dell be up for sale to anyone? So my sense is no, and part of the reason is that ultimately what you look at, well, could they be up for a sale? Not by Nvidia. I think Nvidia still is navigating this margin opportunity that they have. They have a 60% operating margin. Dell's at 7%, just to put some perspective around that. And so even though it is incremental to absolute dollars, that is a wrinkle that they need to navigate in terms of communicating with the street. So I don't think that that Dell or HP is necessarily going to be acquired by Nvidia anytime soon. I do see a path where they become part of potentially AMD, for example, or Intel, some company that's trying to make a turnaround. And the basic concept is, what this rumor, the reason why it got a little bit of momentum was the concept of kind of being an end-to-end AI powerhouse, very similar to what Apple does, doing the full stack between hardware, software, services. That still hasn't, no one's really put all that together. And so there is, when we think about how early we still are in AI, this opportunity to vertically integrate. This is a big theme. Think about what SpaceX is doing, vertically integrating around AI. I think that there is an opportunity there, Mel. So not Nvidia, but I think that this rumor is not over. It's not dead right now. I think we're going to keep seeing a bid on this rumor in the years to come.
Hey, Gene, it's Karen. Thanks for coming on. I mean, this would be a very big deal, Dell, let's say, for AMD, and also would seem like a kind of a big distraction. What makes you think they need it, would want it that much?
Well, what they need, they can't just replicate what NVIDIA is doing. Just trying to square up against them to have the most advanced GPUs is a really difficult road. We've seen that. They've talked about having this uptake in some of their more advanced, AMD's more advanced GPUs. We just simply haven't seen the bid. And the reason why I think that there is potentially something there with some form of a GPU manufacturer is that, again, it's just not the same playbook. And so if I'm AMD, I'm trying to think we're still early, and how can we somehow differentiate? That would be a very powerful differentiation, still in the category of more of a long shot, less than a 50% probability, but you could see how the narrative lines up.
Hey, Gene, so Dell, to Karen's point, it would be a very expensive, in dollar terms, acquisition. It will also obviously weigh on operating margins, like you just mentioned. The flip side of that is like Hewlett. I mean, the stock can't get out of its own way. I mean, if they were to go and buy, anybody to go and buy Hewlett, it would not be looked upon probably, I think the street wouldn't like that. I'm just curious, as you think, are we likely to see M&A? Because to your point, Apple is the only one who's really done this well. SpaceX, the jury's still out there.
So from the kind of the highest level here, I don't think we're going to see anything. I think the probability is less than 50%. I understand why Nvidia put this press release out, because they just simply didn't want to answer this. But is there going to be more on M&A? That's kind of the central question I'm trying to ask. I don't think that Nvidia would be rewarded. Keep in mind, Nvidia has already, since last September, given these limitations, or given some expectations that they're going to be investing $80 billion into their whole different companies over the next several years. And so I think that an additional 30 or additional 100 billion on top of what's been announced, I don't think will be relatively well received. I think, again, big picture is there's still an opening in terms of finding ways to differentiate around building an AI hardware company. No one's kind of brought it all together. The one company that's bringing it all together is SpaceX, which seems off topic given all the excitement around their space initiatives. But ultimately, they're really trying to be end-to-end AI. They're trying to bring everything together, really replicate what Apple has done. So we're going to hear more, I'm sure, on that kind of view down the road. But I think there still is this opportunity for other companies to try to piece.
Of course, we have seen a spike in the price of oil, and that's one of the components in the PPI that we're watching for. Crude oil this morning down 3%. It is sitting at a level of $96 even. Brent is down 1 2/3% at 97.71. So both Brent and crude back below $100 a barrel. A second round of U.S.-Iran peace talks could take place as soon as Thursday. Pakistan is agreeing to offer to host the negotiations in Islamabad. We could see that happen end of week. Iran reportedly reportedly considering a short-term pause to shipments through the Strait of Hormuz to avoid escalation and keep talks on track. No kidding. We've got one Washington tank telling us that it's costing Iran $435 million a day because the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports is underway in the Strait of Hormuz. 15 warships enforcing the cutoff. There was a Washington think tank, Defense of Democracies, that's estimating Iran will lose $435 million a day, driven by the disruption of oil exports. Joining us now is Gulf Oil Senior and Energy Advisor Tom Kloza. Tom, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. What's your expectation on oil over the near and longer term? Do you think oil and gas could go back down before the midterm elections?
Well, I think you might see the futures prices move a little bit lower, but I think we're in for higher prices right now. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in 50 years. The price of crude oil that you mentioned in the futures, WTI and Brent, is about $98 a barrel. But if you actually need physical oil right now, particularly for European buyers, you can pay close to 150. One of these assessments is desperately wrong. But if you sort of split the difference, we probably have a little bit higher to move for gasoline and diesel, and that's going to really test this economic metal.
Kenny Polcari, jump in here.
So, sir, I got to ask you a question because I think the futures market is already pricing in oil down into the mid-70s if you look into the fall. I think if we solve this problem fairly soon, we should see oil come back down. We should not see it extend back up through 100. What am I missing in that conversation?
I don't think you're missing anything. I think it depends on how you regard the word future. If you're looking at the future in the last 6 months of the year, the expectation is that we're going to go lower. The expectation going into this before the war was that we'd have prices around $60 a barrel.
Right.
The problem is the next 45 days or so.
Right.
And if you and futures, you know, let's say Brent futures, for example, that you're talking about June. So an awful lot can happen between now and June.
Right.
And that's really, that has people befuddled who trade this market.
Just the mood music around Anthropic, the power that it has, the use of Claude, the enterprise adoption. It all seems to be very strong right now, Peter. Are there any concerns that you have?
I think when you own a business and when you're an investor in any company, you always have concerns around companies. It's our job to worry about the holdings that we have. But I think that what we're seeing at Anthropic at the moment is unprecedented. In 15 years of investing, I've never seen a company of this scale grow this quickly. And I think what we're seeing is a company that is really pushing the edges of or the boundaries of where AI can be brought to bear in real-world applications, initially in coding, which really broke out last year, and with the Mythos models, we're starting to see how it can really impact cybersecurity as well.
What has been notable, apart from Mythos, has been the adoption, the ARR, that they're managing to post $30 billion, and the amount of enterprises that are now using it, even in the face of concern that they are suing the government because of the current sort of blacklisting singled out by the Pentagon. How is that narrative driving what you think about Anthropic at the moment?
Well, when we invested in Anthropic, one of the reasons we liked the business was the principled approach they took to safety. Now, that, I think, has informed how they're approaching the Mythos models, and it's informed the approach that they've had with the Department of War. So whilst we would, of course, rather not see them in this disagreement with the Department of War, I think, and the company have said this, that there's more that unites them than divides them with the Department of War, and I think it's important to us to see a company standing by the underlying principles which enables them to flourish and enables them to attract and retain key talent.
What has been so interesting about the headline generation from Mythos is that people are looking at the model itself. You know, Caroline's absolutely right, the revenue run rate, all those kind of classic measures for late stage startups. But just your sort of response to the model's capability, Anthropic's place in a group of 5 or 6 frontier labs that are trying to do exactly that. Very big models with great capability.
Yeah, I mean, What we've seen with these LLMs is that the capabilities of the leading edge models will quickly become available to the trailing edge models, and then what separates the likes of Anthropic or OpenAI is their ability to continuously stay at the leading edge. And so, as a citizen, it does concern me that there will be these capabilities which today are in the hands of Anthropic, who we trust. But I think it is inevitable that these tools, whether in the Mythos model or developed by other foundational models, will become more widely available. And I think that leaves a lot of enterprises, a lot of governments, a lot of economic systems vulnerable to attacks.
A lot of focus in the United States on Anthropic. There was a headline this morning that OpenAI, which you are not an investor in, is opening a permanent London office, having wound down the Stargate project in the UK. I ask you all that basically to push you on whether people outside of the United States see that same level of battle that's going on between the frontier labs, and whether the release of a model like Mythos impacts everyday people in the United Kingdom or in Europe.
I think in the very short term, the everyday person on the street is not impacted, this week or next week. But are these models going to impact all of our lives in the months and years to come? Like, yes, absolutely. I think that here in the UK, those that are in the industry, those that follow this, are just as aware and on top of what's going on as peers in the US. But I think that within the UK, there isn't such a sort of kind of cultural resonance of developments in technology as perhaps there is in the US, by virtue of the fact that it's such a large and important part of the US economy, and in the UK, sadly, it is not such a dominant part of our economy.
I mean, Peter, what hasn't been notable is, while we're all spellbound by AI, the whole world has been spellbound by space over the course of the weekend. And I'm interested, therefore, in your exposure to SpaceX and exposure to XAI in many ways. How are you thinking about this moment that everyone's world changes if they get access to some of these big companies, not just being private, but potential to be public as well?
I think it's important that everyday investors are able to access these kinds of companies. And so I think these companies coming to the public markets is overall a good thing. I think what is in many ways a shame for the everyday investor is that there is so much growth that has already happened before these companies come to the public markets. And it's not just Anthropic, it's not just SpaceX. You could look at ByteDance, for instance, in China, the owner of TikTok. ByteDance today is 40 to 50 times larger in revenue and profit than Facebook was when it listed. That's a leg of growth, an enormous amount of growth, which is accrued to private market investors, which is foregone by public market investors. And so this is why we invest in these companies, is to be able to give our clients access to this growth that's happening privately. Historically, that happened in the public markets, but where you can only really do growth investing properly today if you're doing it in both the private and the public markets.
Peter, I know we've had the opportunity to speak to you a lot recently. Just very quickly, at this point, does the market understand the economics of orbital data center ahead of this SpaceX IPO?
No, I don't think the market does understand the economics of orbital data centers. I think that this is a very nascent idea, a nascent technology, and where that value can potentially accrue, I think, is through the vertical integration with the models. If we get to this place where power for compute in AI models is existential pinch point for these businesses. So in short, no, I think it's not yet well understood. It doesn't, in a sense, exist yet. But I think what is well understood at SpaceX is the incredible launch business they have and the incredible economics of Starlink.